welcome to Mysteries of the Mind. I'm so glad that you're joining me. Today is going to be extra special because we are moving from doing a whole series of shows on mysteries of the mind that were self-exploration. They were kind of self-therapy. We talked about addiction and we talked about linguistics, and we talked about maybe how you store things in your mind and how you access information. And hopefully you've been joining me every Thursday, and you've kind of been this far on the journey where you know what the process is like, and you allow yourself this hour of time, wherever you're at listening in, to relax and to kind of unload and to just ground yourself, but to loosely let go for a minute and just enjoy exploring your mind. Now, of course, we're doing it together, and I'm Sarah, if you've not been here before. My name is Sarah Soderlund, and I'm a forensic psychologist, and I truly, truly enjoy profiling and cognitive work and neuroscience and psychology of the mind, especially psychopathy. That's my area of specialties, and I utilize linguistics a lot. I love language. I love that oral fixation. I love profiling by watching a person move, by watching their mouth, and by listening, these intimate moments that let you into their personality. And you can learn a lot about a person by watching them and observing them and paying attention. My hypnotherapist professor always used to say, you pay attention or you pay in pain. And kind of think about that. And that's true in a sense. And so you pay attention and you know yourself and you remove it. You know your filters. And you think about who this person is. And I love the idea of not judging. I think that especially these times here on Mysteries of the Mind, when you're doing self-exploration, you shouldn't judge. When I'm working with offenders, I can't sit down with someone who's committed a ridiculously heinous crime and provide them with utmost care. Through my own ethical obligations, but also through my licensing, through the oath that we have to do no harm, if I'm judging them. So you have to sometimes look past the behavior even, and even further into the why. And so today we're going to talk about a hot topic. It's a hot topic in politics. It's a hot topic in religion. It's a hot topic in society. But it's hopefully going to be an introduction into some thought processes for yourself, to learn a little bit more and to dedicate attention and time to how you feel about sex offenders. Now, depending on where you're tuning in from, anywhere around the world, sex offenders are treated differently from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, country to country, society to society, time period to time period. It really does break down to the law. Now, in philosophy and religion, in human nature, law, right? This majority accepted belief. What is a law? Do you believe? Do you agree with? Do you understand? Are you competent? All of these things come into play. And I sadly believe, I would love Scotty's opinion on this, America, I think we've lost focus. We've got so many laws that perhaps we are losing our ability to be competent and to therefore really care or be mindful of them. When you lose focus because you get lost, things just kind of dissolve. So we see that happening a lot. Our crime rates are high, our prisons are filled. It's a wonderful industry. It's a booming business. And sex offense is one of those things that can be gravely misunderstood and can also be very, very, very difficult to remove your bias and your judgment and your filter. So I'm really, really, really interested When you think about a sex offender, what comes to mind? Are you visualizing a news headline? Are you recalling a memory? Are you empathizing with maybe a victim experience you've had or a trauma that you've lived through? When you think sex offender, are you biased because you've been accused of one? Maybe you and your high school girlfriend had issues with parents and something got out of hand, and something has kept you from being able to attain goals that you had every moment up until that time in your life. Maybe you're wrongfully accused, maybe you're misunderstood, or maybe you're struggling with a severe sex addiction. Maybe you struggle with pedophilia. How do you feel about someone who, quote unquote, struggles with some of the mental illness that we parallel with sex offenders? So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and this is really for you to answer. And if you're brave enough, I dare you, you can join us at intrepidradio.com for a live stream. You can connect cognitively through technological telepathic powers and type your own opinions into a chat room where other people will respond and perhaps debate with you. This can be a hot topic, so I'm interested in your dissociative, immediate response to some of these questions. Is a sex offender wrong? Is a sex offender bad? Is a sex offender sick? What age is the sex offender? What demographic is the sex offender? Can the sex offender be cured? Some of these are the biggest hitting headlines in the last few years in places like Time Magazine, People Magazine, Huffington Post, and other social sites online that try and really grasp onto that hotspot within us all for sex offenders. But think about the headline just in itself. Can they be cured? Well, that implies that they're ill, that they have a sickness. When you answered that question impulsively, what was your response? Are they sick? So much of my personal response is it depends. It depends, right? It depends. Because sex offender, man, that label, we've talked about it here on the show before at Mysteries of the Mind. A lot of times the majority associates that with things like pedophilia, the things that as a society as a whole make our skin crawl. Incest, these things that have a taboo, this stigma of being immoral or sinful or wrong by the masses, religious or not, these kind of ghoulish crimes that we try not to think about. We hope are illnesses because that separates it from ourself, but it also gives hope that maybe there could be a cure. I don't know if you're a Nietzsche believer or not, but are we inherently these good people? Are we, doing things because we want things to be safe for ourselves and our own legacy and children? Are we hoping that they're sick so that it can be a better world for us to live in? Or do we somehow identify with the sex offender and hope that it can be accepted? It's funny, the sex offender is typically that gross ice cream handing, guy that gives out a puppy at the end of the street, snatches up little children. In today's day and age, it's a lot of cyber crime, child pornography and exploitation. But that's just here in America. There's also large sex rings, prostitution, especially in Minneapolis with the Minneapolis International Airport. We're kind of one of the top places in the United States for sex trafficking, which is kind of crazy. It's not just young women under the age of 16, but also young boys under the age of 10 to 12. And There's something to be said about the sex offender and what determines that a crime is committed, breaking a law that has some sexual nature to it. It could be sodomy, it could be public displays of affection, it can be a range of things that have a sexual connotation, but get maybe mislabeled or misdiagnosed as a sex offense. And there's a large scale of taboo or not taboo. Sometimes we hear the story behind the crime and go, oh, you were 17 and your girlfriend was 16 and the laws of statutory rape were out of your control and, you got hit with this and now here you are. That stinks, right? We seem to kind of have this, oh, that's not a big deal. But teachers having sex with their students where the age range is like 15 to 30, and the gender stereotypes of whether it's a female teacher versus a male teacher. We kind of have these ideas of what's predatory and what's not. And what's exciting is kind of in the last, I say exciting, maybe that's not the right word. In the last decade, we've seen a lot more acceptance that the female can be a sexual predator as well. We see these female teachers kind of going after, prying on the young, helplessly hormonal teenage boys. And the victim now in a sex scenario is the male, which we didn't usually ever see in the past. So that's kind of exciting that we're kind of dissolving these sex stereotypes, because sex stereotypes can really be a huge obstacle for correctly profiling and predicting future behaviors of people. You want to let go of what society has told you and instead just observe. And females can be just as much a sexual predator as a male. So that's kind of something that I hope you'll maybe think about. Here in future shows, I hope to have on one particular person that I go to when I am really looking to expand my mind on sexual crime and the understanding of the sexual deviant, things like sex addiction, that we see in sex offenders for those who are struggling with the mental illness part of it. And yes, we are seeing molestation cases, rape cases, sex offense cases that, as strangely as it might seem, say sexomnia, somebody who engages in sex acts while sleeping, that now they're not competent and so it's not a sex offense, even though an assault took place. And so a diagnosis of sexomnia, we have to make this more scientific. We have to make this more understood, not just for prevention, but for assessment. And I want you to think about that. How much of a sex crime is a crime? Where is your line? Is consent where you draw the line? And how old is old enough to consent? Do you believe and agree with a lot of the laws in America? We have kind of the age of 18, you are now sexually able to consent for yourself. And some states it's lowered to 16, and in a few states it's even as low as 13 with parental consent. They can get married and they can do adult, quote unquote, adult things if their parents sign off and consent to it. But for the most part, we as a society, our consenting age for things of sexual nature are 18. Do you agree with that? What's your immediate reaction? Do you agree with that? Well, hormones do have a lot to do with it. The environment has a lot to do with it. Society has a lot to do with it. And of course, society is more sexualized now. Sexual deviance is more accepted. Just think about in the last few years, one of the best-selling books was 50 Shades of Grey, and this idea of kind of mild BDSM behavior is a sexy thing, is an accepted thing, and women and men everywhere lined up to read the book and see the movie and goo goo gaga and host SNL and all this other stuff, and it was kind of embraced by the masses and by Hollywood, and I find that terribly interesting. Did it make it okay to just strike up a conversation and talk about something that might otherwise be taboo? Because when we start expanding our awareness and our acceptance as a society, what becomes deviant then changes, and deviant is what reflects the law. And so then the laws have to kind of adjust for that. And it all starts with you. What's inappropriate? What is appropriate? Are we over-sexualized? Are we under-sexualized? Do you feel that an open sexual society is a good thing, and that eventually lowering what we consider sex offenses and changing the way our society treats them might evolve? Are we unfair to sex offenders by labeling them? Well, what about those juveniles that fall in the jurisdiction crack holes? The sidewalk cracks of the child courts, drug courts, and juvenile courts across America, the juvenile offender. Meg Fagundis is a speaker and terribly gifted speaker. And I encourage you to check her out. She talks about the juvenile sexual offender and sex crime and sexual identity and sexual behavior and pressure and reaction and response and technology and all of this stuff that's really changed what the juvenile is and what the sex offender is and what the accepted behaviors are. How is it that we can reward children who are playing, very over-sexualized video games and reward them in every way and condition them and then let them loose in society when they're 16, 17-year-old men or women and then tell them that casual sex is not okay when it's everywhere. Is your parenting enough to override the conditioning that society is doing? Psychology really, really, really can help dissect further into what you feel about this topic. And Meg Fagundis is fantastic at kind of taking you on that journey and showing you some statistics that are just mind-blowing on the juvenile offender. So I want you to think for a second you have someone who is out drinking with their friends. It's a Friday night. It's kind of a graduation ceremony or maybe a bachelor ceremony. Who knows? It's a gathering. And he decides that he doesn't want to be a drunk driver. He's trying to make the best decisions possible. And he's going to walk home. But then halfway on the walk home, he really has to use the restroom. But it's after 3 a.m. Everything's closed. Residential, everything. Gas stations, everything. Most everyone's asleep. Everything's quiet. But he has to go. So he stops right where he's at, goes to the nearest tree, and uses the restroom. Quickly pulling up his pants, comes back out on the sidewalk, and a police officer, pulls him over. He's charged with indecent exposure in a child area in a playground that was just out of his line of sight, but it was there in the shadows, and being intoxicated during the crime, and being in a terribly residential area. This is going to look, horrible. So the judge gives him a very strict consequence, maybe 6 months probation, a fine, and then the label of a sex offender until treatment is received or assessment is required, or depending on your jurisdiction, what's required to remove that title. Man, you can't live within a certain radius of church, schools, daycares, childhood centers, colleges, universities. You can't attend school functions. You can't go see your kids' Christmas Carol play or, graduation ceremony. You can't go to church with the family. You can't go to the basketball games. You can't take them to the park, teach them to ride their bike. You can't do any of that. And if a church or a school or a learning center or a daycare or something wants to build itself within the place you just bought your home, you need to be relocating. Otherwise, you're in violation of your offense. So, man, you start thinking about you can't register to vote and you can't carry a gun. You start feeling like you're a felon when all you did was urinate because you didn't want to drink and drive and get home. Maybe this is the scenario. Maybe it's not. Maybe this is a man who raped a 9-month-old baby. But they're both going to be labeled sex offenders. But they're two terribly different people. Very different individuals, different motivations, different behaviors, different triggers, different cognitive processes, different treatments in the eyes of the law, but it may or may not be treated any differently once they're incarcerated or once they're, out on probation. They might just be picking up trash on the side of the road. I want you to think about what you find to be a sex offense and what plays into that definition. Are you a religious person? Are you a parent? Are you a sex addict? Are you a victim? What experiences in your life help you define your behaviors and actions and beliefs towards what is a sex offender? Have you really ever given it much thought? Well, one of the things that I want to further delve into, with your permission, of course, is sexual deviance. We're going to talk about kind of culturally what's accepted by the majority and what's not accepted, what some of the misunderstandings are, misdiagnoses are, and how we do assess someone who has violent addictions or sexual addictions, and how those are different from one another. I want to go into your mind. We want to go there together to a place that you've defined deviance, and to some of the folders that might be found in the back of your brain, in those crevices of your memory where you go to access your information. And we want to illuminate some of those folders that you may have kept in the dark for some time. So I hope you'll take a deep breath, be really excited to go to a new place as we explore sexual motivations and deviance after the break. I want you to get a water. I want you to shake it off. I want you to get comfortable and join me here on Intrepid Radio for Mysteries of the Mind with Sarah Soderlund here after the break.
America's Most Haunted, The Secrets of Famous Paranormal Places is now an epic book from Berkeley Penguin. History, legends, investigations, interviews, and profiles of America's 10 most haunted hotspots by Eric Olson and haunted housewife Teresa Argy. Be sure to join us on Twitter and Facebook at AM Haunted, Pinterest at America's Most Haunted, and our website, americas-most-haunted.com. And here every week on America's Most Haunted Radio with all the top names in the paranormal field.
It's not about anything else.
Go to your room and lock the door, cause when you try it once, you want to try it some more. Size doesn't matter and that's a fact. It might be small, but it's a big impact. Bust a nut, bust a nut. Grab a bag of corn nuts and bust a nut. They're lightly toasted and hard as well. Enjoy yourself, we won't tell. Everybody does it, they like it a lot. You can do it at school, just don't get caught. It takes a few minutes if you don't delay. Take your time, make it last all day. Bust a nut, bust a nut.
Corn Nuts, an intensely crunchy corn snack, comes in 7 nut-busting flavors. Bust a nut at a convenience store near you.
Out of Jeddah in the M&M Survivor Challenge, the sun beats down on the empty quarter.
Hold on, Red. I need a drink. That's better.
Hey, Yellow, go easy with that water. It's got to last till Dubai.
Okay, Red. I'll be careful.
Guess how many weeks it will take Red and Yellow to cross the empty quarter desert from Jeddah to Dubai and win great M&M survival kits with laptop, mobile phone, and GPS tracking system and lots more. Count the colors inside M&M's packs for a clue.
Yellow, you crazy nut, the water! It's all gone!
Ow, you don't have to hit me.
We'll never make it now.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to me, Sarah Soderlund, here on Mysteries of the Mind, and we were talking before the break about sexual offenders. And we're next going to be talking about sexual motivations, deviance, sexual deviance. And these are some things that kind of become interesting because it really does break down to linguistics. There is an incredibly, for me, it was a little awkward. There is an assessment test you can take for you and a sexual partner, you and your spouse, or you and your boyfriend and girlfriend, or whatever. And it goes on a level of 1 to 5. 1 is uncomfortable, and 5 is very interested, in these certain acts, sexual acts. And it goes all the way through fetishes to certain oral behaviors or group activities or voyeurism. It kind of covers these different tangible areas of addiction and slightly deviant behaviors. Deviant in a sense that it's not socially acceptable, but healthy in a sense that it's sexually acceptable on an intimate level. But are you okay with, fondling or not fondling, or masturbation or not? And really, sending naked pictures or not, or, what is your level of intimacy? Are you okay with talking dirty or not? And you take this assessment test, and I have it if you're interested. You can email me at theparanormalsarah@gmail.com. It's quite fun. And it can raise some interesting conversation if you're not careful. You need to be prepared. If you want to really explore that with your partner, and you kind of think, man, do I? And if you do, are they as interested? Are you in a level of intimacy that it will be productive because you're in a learning state? Or are you in an isolated state and in a resentful state and, frustrated and impatient, and, you're doing this out of desperation and the intention is slightly off? It may not be as productive. It can do quite the opposite. So be careful and be prepared and be open. And the best advice, both for yourself and for ever asking partners about sexual acts, remove the judgment. You have to remove the judgment. Now, I'm interested in what your belief is on the age of someone being able to consent to sex. And for you, What does the word sex mean? What's the definition? Is it oral sex? Vaginal sex? Any type of intercourse? Physical intercourse? In the law, in the eyes of the law, sometimes sex isn't considered anything unless penetration of a physical orifice in a sexual way or in a sexual manner. And so then that's when we have to really say, okay, what's a sexual manner? Is sex a motivation always for orgasm? Is sex always a motivation for intimacy? Is sex always a motivation for what? What is sex to you? When you think of sex, what is the goal? What is the motivation behind it? Some scientists say that sexual motivation is one of the most important aspects of humanity. If we weren't motivated to procreate, then we probably would not, and the human species would end. So, in a sense, just logically, rationally, biologically, feeling like you want to have sex, being horny, it's just doing your job as a part of the human species, right? You can't help it. It's in your genes. Does that settle well with you when you hear that? Do you feel like sex is something more? Well, some of the top 2 scientists that, of course, analyze human sexual behavior, at least here in the United States, we widely accept a lot of Sigmund Freud, but also Alfred Kinsey. And you may not even realize how much of their theories and psychoanalysis might play into some of your unconscious beliefs about sex. Now, surveying thousands of people and their sexual behaviors, Kinsey's discoveries were really, really interesting. Now think about trying to study this, okay, just for a second. Think about your own perceptions. And then think about things associated with natural sexual behavior like masturbation. When you click on that folder in your mind, when you hear that word, when you say that word, what comes to mind? Masturbation can be a traumatic event. It can be a curious event. It can be a natural event. But it's an event that everyone has. Some people associate it with shame or a bashfulness. Some people approach it with confidence and ego. Some people might associate it with pornography and therefore cheating or, allowing other people to be, a part of a sexual relationship and kind of this penetration of intimacy. And women and men think about these things differently. And research has shown that women tend to be a little bit more shameful, and some of the kind of cliches that we would probably rationally come to and think, yeah, that's common sense, right? But there's actually a sexual response cycle. And after studying hundreds of volunteers, if you can imagine, people having sex in a lab and being observed and all sorts of things being measured, whether it be the length of a man's penis to vaginal expansion, you name it. Thousands of trials over 20 years. Extensive research. Trying to scientifically approach concepts like curing homosexuality or the physiological breakdown of a sexual act. And they came to the idea, Kinsey and his research team, the sexual response cycle, which is actually in 4 stages. You have initial excitement, right? And this is a biological response. This is that respiration, that heart rate, the butterflies, right? This is physiologically speaking the excitement stage, the erection. Everything is wet. This is a biological response. What are you conditioned to believe is sexy? Specifically, you are unique to anyone else. So when you double click on that folder in your mind for what is sexy, the schoolgirl outfit, role playing, asphyxiation, aromatherapy, the maid, dominatrix, I mean, whatever it is, where did that come from? Was that planted? Was that conditioned? Was it the first porn you ever saw? Was it the first conversation you ever overheard? Was it, something you stayed up late and saw between the banisters, of your dad? I mean, where did this experience become a process in your mind? Who put that folder there? Where did it come from? Right-click Properties and take a look. What excites you? For me, if you want to explore a little bit of me, I'll tell you. Initial excitement for me is a man with broad shoulders. It's sexy. I think women think shoulders. You think of grabbing shoulders. It's sexy. I love bald men. Consider me a Freudian, but my dad and my grandpa were bald. And I love the hitman. I'm a gamer. I love Assassin's Creed. I love kind of the villain, mysterious man. This is an excitement. These things are visual triggers for me. And for me, I'm also an aroma person. There's certain colognes that are just really sexy. And cinnamon is very sexy to me. And I don't know why or where that comes from. I don't know if my first great college sex experience had cinnamon incense in the background or something. I don't know. I don't know where that came from. But to me, that's a turn on. That's an initial excitement. But now wait, we all agreed there for a minute that it was biological, right? The genital area becomes engorged with blood, and we didn't say that was okay. We didn't push that trigger, but yet we just explored that it might be associated with a memory or conditioned by a type of man that's always been a good man in my life and a strong, stable man in my life. So that's a turn on. Biologically, somehow that's connected because maybe that's a good husband and maybe that's a good mate. And, well, wait, mate, that goes back to sex. That goes back to someone that I want to have babies with, right? So how much of initial excitement is out of our control? Can we change what was planted there? Can you highlight any of that stuff in the folder that you maybe are uncomfortable with and take it out? Well, you can, but as we all know, in our mind, everything is a river of energy. It's like a river. So we can build a dam, but we have to move that energy somewhere else. We have to replace that behavior. Just like an addiction, we have to have a response behavior, a replacement behavior. You know your triggers and you block it. But the next stage is the plateau phase. Respiration, heart rate continue. Everything is ready for orgasm. Plateau phase doesn't necessarily have anything to do with sex. It could be masturbation. But what's happening during, from initial excitement to orgasm? The plateau, the place in between. For you, if you're associating it with sex, this might be, the sexual positions. whether you like something fast or hard or paced or not. A plateau phase might be associated to needing it to be in the dark, or you need it to be alone, or you need to be watched, or you need to have a lot of stimulation. You need, loud music and things to distract you because you like to prolong the plateau phase. And we talk about sexual motivations and ego and orgasm and the judgments that we put on orgasm. Ultimately, everyone wants orgasm, but you try and make sure the other person does or doesn't, or you do or you don't, or everyone is different. What's in that folder for you? And think about what you have associated with that. There's some really interesting judgments associated with this. Especially for women, for example, we are never illustrated as, orgasm. You don't usually see it very often, and it's not really illustrated a lot in pornography. And women were typically seen as a subordinate, so orgasm wasn't as important. And so some women associate shame with that because of what society has conditioned. Women don't necessarily talk to their daughters about orgasm or how to reach orgasm or how physiologically we have to have certain things maybe to reach orgasm. But it can be a lot in the mind too. So how much of sexual motivation is biological? How much of it is mental? And then eventually you have a resolution phase, and this is physiologically your resting phase. How soon before you can have another orgasm? How soon before you have initial excitement? How soon before you have a physiological urge to repeat the cycle? And how does it associate to psychological sexual motivations? This is something we think about with the sex offender, right? This is something because we think about it about sex with ourselves. We think about it just sexually. If we want to understand these motivations, we have to understand ourselves and then try to understand those we're having sex with. That's really all we can do, right? Well, unlike most animals, we, you, and I, our sexual desire is not motivated completely or strictly by hormones. It can actually be a lot of both biological and psychological factors. You can have issues where people have had trauma, and so they lose the ability to have sex, but they still have sexual desires. So there's a lot of conflict. Maybe they're misleading. They want to be sexy and they want to flirt, and they're kind of misleading a partner, and then eventually when the sex act becomes something that's happening and becomes a reality, this natural progression of the cycle, and there's a refusal, it can cause conflict. Does this create a sex crime? Who's at fault? Both people were consenting, but then one person refused to get to a certain stage when the other person at that point is already in a cycle of being in the stage of sexual arousal. So you start thinking about anything from erotic material, feelings, responses, hormones, interactions, just a whole amazing myriad of sexual desires that you see in society and that you see in yourself, but mostly also about orientation. What do you consider to be healthy and normal? Parenting styles, relationships that you have, your own sexual identity, how masculine you are, how feminine you are. If you had heterosexual parents, homosexual parents, sexually active parents, religious parents, there's a ton of environmental influences that are going to be in that folder for you that are going to affect your sexual orientation. Have you ever thought about that? What would you like to add to that folder? You have an opportunity right now to add things to that folder that are sexually healthy. If there are things in that folder that have ever caused you conflict, you can remove them. And you can do that right now. Now, research has shown that biological factors, of course, are going to be playing a role. Genetics, right? Things, it can be anything from nutrition, it can be brain structure, it can be all sorts of different things. Hormones throughout life, when and when you don't go through menopause, when and when you don't lose your sex drive, so to speak, and what things turn you on later in life that didn't, how things change, how your desires change, who's molding them. Are you the person adding to that folder, or do you have an application on your computer program, something feeding you all kinds of bugs and just putting a bunch of cookies in that folder? You can take it out and you can clean it. I encourage you to do so on a regular basis. Take a look at what you think is okay and what isn't. And then kind of decide, okay, you've got things like incest. Well, what's incest? Is it your third cousin, your fifth cousin, stepson, stepdaughter? Is it a role? Is it the authoritative presence that a parent should never have sex with a child? And does that go to adopted parents or assumed parents or godparents or uncles? Is it a blood-related thing? When you begin to think about incest, when you double-click on that file folder in your mind, when you linguistically dissect it, what do you find? Interesting. When you click on consent, I want you to find consent because sometimes that's terribly important, especially in the legal community. I want you to go into that sexual folder and I want you to double-click and find consent and double-click again. And I want you to visualize and I want you to imagine right now, what does consent look like? What's in that folder? What if someone changes their mind after the sex act is complete? What if after the sex, someone says, well, I didn't want it. But yet they initiated it, they did it, everything was great, and then a week later they changed their mind. Is that rape? Because rape has a lot to do with consent. Is consent a verbal consent? And how old is old enough to know when they're verbally consenting? A 12-year-old? A 13-year-old? 15-year-old? When does the number seem okay in your mind? What number appears when you see consent? Consenting age. These are things that are very, very, very specific to jurisdictions, laws in your areas, things that we might associate with the sexual offender. But you're a sexual creature. Have you ever broken a law? Are you a sex offender that just didn't get caught? Maybe I will admit, in some ways I guess I am, because in many states, oral sex, even with consenting marital partners, is against the law. For those of you out there listening, maybe you've ever engaged in anal sex, and in some states that, even with consent, even if you're married, even if you're 40, even if you have all the KY jelly in the world and are ready, it's illegal. And if you were to get caught, or if something were to happen, a law was broken. I don't want to create an instance, I don't know. But it could be that you're a sex offender. Now, as funny as it might be to talk like that, that's the truth. Is some of the stigma that we put on these individuals fair? And how do we help them learn that having sex with their son or a 6-year-old or something that we might find to be a mental illness, how do you help cure something like that? Well, society has gauged things like pedophilia to be a mental illness, things like sexsomnia or other paraphilias, things that you do in your sleep without complete awareness or consent or competency. We have these diagnoses. But sometimes it's really difficult to talk with someone about it. It's difficult to prove these behaviors. It's difficult to get through the initial excitement phase when you're in a laboratory being watched and observed, or maybe that's your thing, voyeurism. But again, it all comes back to, what does the majority say is okay? Have you gone to that recent conference on what is okay? What is sexually deviant? Bad, wrong. Do you think that these individuals deserve treatment? If they are ill, how do you change a sexual desire? Have you ever changed a sexual desire? Have you ever had to compromise intimacy with a partner? Maybe you've always liked the lights off and they have to have the lights on. Maybe you always thought sex toys were really strange and it made you uncomfortable, but this person required it. So you were open to that sort of thing. When, on a small, intimate, individual level, did you ever change a desire, change a cognitive process, and associate it with an action? And change deviant in your life? And is society doing that? Maybe pornography wasn't something that was needed, it was just used, and now with technology and easy access, it's become an addiction. Maybe you've created that river in your mind. That's a heavy psychological thing associated to a sexual behavior. An addiction, a sexual addiction, especially if in association with a sexual offender, that treatment and assessment is much more complicated. Think about just your community, just your city that you live in. What's considered a sex offense? What's considered sexually deviant? Are you in an evangelical community, a Lutheran community? Are you under, English law? Are you living on a commune? I mean, what's socially acceptable? What's the law? Do you know? Well, then why do you care what's an offender? Why do you care what's deviant? Is that a selfishly driven response? Or do you just feel it's a call to the humanity, or a call to your fellow brothers, or a call to your children maybe for future protection? Do you feel like a sexual predator exists? Are there such things? People who just can't even control their desires, their urges, their actions. Well, these are those people that we think are ill, and in a lot of jurisdictions, they are not receiving treatment. And sexual offense can be an extremely high recidivism rate. It's almost, I believe it is, second to violent addiction. So think about that. We feel so strongly about it. We want the change. We understand what we think is deviant and what isn't. And we understand these people might need help and assessment and more complex treatment, but we don't quite want to get involved. Maybe we don't fully understand it. I'm interested in what you have in some of those folders there. I'm interested if there's anyone listening that wants to make that connection in the chat room. If you have any questions about sexual motivations, psychoanalysis, sexual desires. I mean, there are things that immediately you can start talking about that people might say are going to be deviant, astray from the norm. The golden shower. Do you like being urinated on? Most of us don't. We don't like being puked on or pooped on or peed on. However, ejaculatory facials shown all the time in pornography. Men just coming everywhere, all over a woman's face. And so this is more widely accepted. It's not so taboo. It's not considered deviant. That's quite interesting. What's the difference? If one thing is a sexual desire to another person, why do we care? What's the difference? What's the harm? Isn't that what laws are about? Harm? Doing harm to others? Infringing upon the liberties of another? Isn't that what our freedom is about? Laws that protect our freedoms? That we can do what we want in the privacy of our own home unless it does harm to others. So harm to others, then we start getting into pleasure and pain, and that is a whole nother radio show. Pleasure and pain is quite a different radio show because some might even say they're one and the same. So then, man, we really start digging apart sexual offense, right? Well, I'm interested. I'm interested in maybe what was in your folder when you started the show and what's in your folder now. I'm interested in maybe what your changes could be in sexual motivations and what replacement behaviors you'd like to have. Please email me if you have questions at theparanormalsarah@gmail.com or check me out on Facebook or Twitter at ParanormalSarah, as we're going to be talking all week and gearing up for guests such as Meg, that I referred to in tonight's show, talking about juvenile sex offenders, and Dr. James Fallon talking about the psychopath inside on future shows here on Mysteries of the Mind on my very favorite network, intrepidradio.com. Until next week, guys.